So then, we are back with the more understandings from the Renewed Covenant from the Aramaic English translation of the Word. This translation is from the original documents and also the manuscript from the time of the Hebrews, from the holy prophets of old. And we can name some of them, such as Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, Ezekiel, Daniel, and then also others that gave many prophecies related with the end of time. So at this time where we are finding lots of new information coming in nearly every day, we find also imperative understanding the text of the original documents and always evaluating a couple of aspects in terms of heaven, giving directives, and then secularly speaking, government during the time those records were then placed on paper. From the original manuscripts we find most of the prophecies related with the specific times. However, there was a king or kingdom in charge of the known world. What it meant was there were times where then there was a particular kingdom in charge of the whole secular system, while then heaven was then explained in terms of heaven's guidance and heaven's directive, and how these governments should behave when speaking of heaven. There are many factors we can evaluate, such as during the time of Daniel. He was from the land, the promised land, and then the land was invaded, and because unfortunately Israel did not maintain the yearly Shabbat, and they were told to maintain their yearly Shabbat, and they didn't, so that's why the land had to rest for 70 years. That's the main reason why the nation then was invaded and then the people were taken captive. However, during this time, Daniel and his friends, then they went to Babylon, and they were trained in the Babylonian culture, in the Chaldean culture, and then the Babylonian king was in charge of the known world. Many people, they think his rulership was only of the known world of the time of his borders. But unfortunately they are mistaken. When it's related with the holy writings, the most influential person in the earth, secularly speaking, there was no other culture that would get near of this particular culture in charge during the time of the writing of the documents. Every time there was then, for instance, the Babylonian, symbolized by the head of gold, and then the metals, they drop in value, and then afterwards we have the Medo-Persian, and then later other kingdoms. Then we understand a sequence of the most powerful kingdom in the earth. That's why then these days we find this last part of Earth's history, we find China is this very country. They truly are going to become worldwide secular tradespeople. There is no question about it. In terms of then the countries in trouble in Europe, such as the Greco country and many others, for instance Spain, Portugal, they can already start writing on their agendas a visit with China's president. There is no way out of it. And then the euro obviously is dismantled because it goes directly against the prophecies of Daniel regarding the statue and the base of it. Iron does not mix with clay. And Daniel, he lived during the time of the very top ahead of the gold. Meant the most prominent time of secular or Gentile ruling in the earth. And Daniel had the privilege to serve in the king's palace and then serve him as a very special advisor. He had a very high position And he did understand the influence when the time that was taking place. For instance, the nation was 70 years in captivity, and he was there during the time. So he spent his lifetime mostly testimonying of the hand of Yahweh in heaven, while then he would give directives to the earth. And precisely this time we are living in, it is a similitude of what he experienced back then. But during this time is worldwide. We are going absolutely, for sure, certainly, observe the mighty hand of Yahweh doing the work in this earth. It's extremely important understanding that the time of then the deceit of the Gentiles then has ended in terms of what heaven should be. However, there is another section of it that wasn't explained truly regarding then the rulership secularly of the Gentiles. So there were a couple of aspects of the Gentile rulership, and those they were linked prior of understanding this new era, where then the deceit is over with. We understand what it means, the holy services of the second, and then we understand also the deceit that came along with this Gentile rulership. However, because there is the 2,000 years granted by the Messiah when he spent 2 days with the Samaritans, there is a third layer on top of it related with the secular rulership without the deceit of heaven. So previously in the other videos, this particular era was only related with the divine understanding, not the secular. At the time we discovered then there is the secular rulership of the Gentiles, yet for some time. So then we understand what it means when Daniel said that at the end nations would try to come together and adhere to each other, but they would not. So then Daniel gave a certain aspect of our time, and then the other prophet gave us then the time where then the restoration would come. So then you find portion of it perfectly described as Daniel, a statesperson. He described the rulership of a Gentile king of the entire world. There was no person most important at the time than the king of Babylon. However, we understand it from the aspect of Yeshayahu. We understand then heaven's aspect of the restoration. So a couple of situations at the same time. Yeshayahu explains then the restoration of the cities and then the city, while then he explains also the relationship with the world, how it should be during this time as those areas are being refurbished. And both of them, they point back to the Torah, the instructions, obviously. So then these nations in trouble in Europe, they can start already writing on their agendas. Absolutely, certainly. They have to make a deal with China and verify what China can do for them. And then coming and having a visit with them and verify what the country has in terms of natural resources and what they can provide them in exchange for products. Because they are absolutely ruined. It was a big mistake of the entire Europe to come and trying to have a singular monetary system. They went against the holy prophecy of Daniel, and that's what they ended up at. So those in charge of these monetary system that decide to come together, they are absolutely wrong. So what they must do then is provide at least a pathway out of this crisis by not promoting anymore the monetary system, but then they should get away from it, returning to what they were previously. However, the leaders of this monetary system must then provide a way out for the other countries, because they have to restart on their own. And there is only a country during this time that can do it. It's China. And then they're going to verify what can be done. It's very imperative, for instance, country truly in trouble, the Greco country, where the false Messiah came from, and then Spain, and then Portugal, those countries should come together and try to have a deal with China out of desperation, so to speak, because they have no choice. Even if they have to do it on a basis of exchange, until they start baby steps of the economy and then rebuilding. So there is no point in riots, violence, disaster, breakage. It's absolutely stupidity, because if they break their own, they have to fix themselves. You throw a rock on the window, since you don't have another window to replace it, you have to fix it. And nobody is responsible for it other than the country leadership then deciding to come against the prophecy of Daniel, and they got themselves in trouble. The leaders are the very responsible people that got themselves in this situation. But Yahweh, wisely, He has provided a country at the end where they have then so much, but there is a price with it. And they have to work together. And be very grateful, because if it wasn't for Yahweh, the country would be ruined. So the signs of the wisdom of the utmost from the Creator is already starting to showing. The countries must acknowledge they were wrong. They did not evaluate properly the holy writings, and that's where they ended up at. But that's not to put down, it's only to show them that the Creator is much higher than their thoughts and their understandings. Yet, lovingly, He has provided a way out of it, in terms of these troublesome countries coming together and then trying to find a way out of it, making partnership with China. And it must be in China's terms. They won't have any terms of their own, other than provided whatsoever they have in terms of natural resources, so then they can do on a basis of exchange. Until they come up with their own monetary system, and then the country restarts. Thus, the time of rebuilding. So then you find absolutely precisely on time what Daniel the prophet spoke, and then precisely on time what Yirmiyahu spoke. While Yahweh's people then, they are more aware of, and they know what should be doing. Absolutely on time. So those countries in Europe trying to come up with ideas of violence and destruction and anger, there is absolutely no reason for it. it is true the nations came together, they made a mistake, and they can turn around and dismantle it and then get on with it. But please don't break any windows because you have to replace yourself. And since the country is broken, they don't have any money, how they're going to get another window if you break it? So please don't do it, because there is a way out of it, and the leaders must come together very quickly in these next few days and dismantle this crazy idea of this euro, and then have absolutely a haste visit with the President of China and verify what he can do for them. There are obviously no promises, but China is known for being very generous. So it's already a positive on their side. But have in mind, since they are then the leading trade, it's by their terms. Because when Yahweh, the true Creator, gave the king of Babylon the forward motion, we understand what he did. He was in forward motion every time. There were times that he went beyond the limit and he had to take some time to reflect. But as far as his authority was never questioned. And the countries of the Middle East, obviously they take the same route. As far as Iran, there is absolutely no choice for them other than relinquishing this bomb crazy idea and turn around the plant and do what they say they would do, produce electricity. And fits perfectly with the time of rebuilding. So also themselves would be having a deal with China to rebuild their country. But then they have to come out clean. They can't act as scoundrels. They said they would use the nuclear capability for electricity creation, so do what they said they would do. You must understand, because so far the world has experienced scoundrelization in government and scoundrelization in so-named divine beliefs. Both of them junk. Comes a time when the situation changes. However, there are options. These countries, they either relinquish their evils and then they do what is proper, as provided from a country never waged the war of invasion and extremely prosperous, providing equipment and materials at very inexpensive prices so they can rebuild. Or they can succumb to their own stupidity. These are the choices. One of them wise, one of them unwise. As far as is for America, we are cornered. We are boxed. We have nearly no industry, we have no trade nearly. Our country is very depleted, and our foreign policy is being rejected around the world. And China know they are the very country at the end in charge of this planet, secularly speaking. Simply understand the prophecies of old when there was a country in charge. During the time of Daniel, was Babylon. And it's incredible the way Yahweh had decided to do it, because it is so tremendously powerful. His presence and His schedule is as strong and solid as rock. There is no human being that can ever change His understanding. During this time, China leads this planet. No person, nation, kingdom, or prince of any kind can come against it. We are dealing with the divine in charge and then a secular mandated system in charge. There is no way out of it. So the best for those nations in trouble is always having then a piece of paper, pencil, and then write. And then the other nations with the materials and raw materials, obviously they would make a nice price. So the factory of the world can maintain itself, because they're going to have a lot of requests. And at their terms. Please stay tuned, much more coming up, because then we're going to investigate the Proverbs. How the nations should then evaluate their problems, how they should relate with this new trade system coming, and how they should, in a political understanding, behave themselves. Please stay tuned.